Mark will now be played by Dawn Shuler. So Mark and I are partners both in business and in life, and we love training at our core. And so we've each developed programs, and Mark's baby is the dysfunctional communication styles. But together we've been teaching it, training it for years. So that's why I was able to jump in when we realized that there had been a communication error. Isn't that funny? Dysfunctional communication and the styles in the workplace. So what I'm going to do is give you a brief information there on this. There's so much information. We have an online course that's something like 8 hours long. So for me to try to distill this into about 20 minutes is quite the feat. So I'll try not to talk too fast, and I'll also probably try to leave time for questions at the end. So let's go. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Okay, so the reason why we talk about dysfunctional communication styles is because communication is such a broad umbrella. We're communicating all the time in so many different ways. Well, sometimes it doesn't work. And sometimes we can leave an interaction feeling like that didn't go well, or your energy level dropped, or you just don't feel good. You feel awful. And that's part of the dysfunctional communication style. We will talk about different styles, and they're not always dysfunctional, but it has to do with what happens during or after that interaction. That's what could make it dysfunctional. And the reason that this is helpful is because if we can figure out kind of what went wrong, then it doesn't hold as much power over us, and we can get through it or defend ourselves against it if this is someone we're involved in the workplace on a regular basis. And so there's a whole section we do on boundaries, buffers, and defenses and neutralizers in our more in-depth trainings, so that you can again protect yourself from these. All right. Um, uh, this is going to be really quick. So we're defining it. We're going to do the intro to the 15 styles. That's probably going to be the most interesting to you anyway. That's Mark. This is me. So you got me today. And so when you have functional communication, because if we're going to talk about dysfunctional communication, we need to define what functional communication is. And if you think about a tennis match, you lob the ball over the net and the other person lobs it back. So it's back and forth. And there is positive momentum that you leave with a positive feeling, or at least neutral. You don't feel drained at the end. And whatever you're communicating about, forward motion is achieved. So now let's see this in action. So person A, person B, and then together, they both needed, both ingredients for that functional communication. So what's dysfunctional communication style? And it is a pattern, and that's the part that's really important, of a way of speaking and interacting that shuts down connection, inhibits forward action. They drain the energy, that might lower your self-esteem, and they can affect the overall health and well-being of a relationship or in an organization. That part, patterns, is really important here, because everybody has a bad day. Everybody can go off the handle. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have a dysfunctional communication style. It just means that they had a bad day. What makes it a dysfunctional communication style is when it is a pattern that happens over and over. Um, so two things to be present is that there is that negative feeling, and that forward motion is, let's see, I'm getting a call. It looks like from you, Arlene. Hello?
No,
No, no.
sorry. It just pocket dialed itself.
Well, no problem. I just want to make sure that, if there was a technical problem, I was aware of it. All right. So sorry about that, folks. Okay, so why do we care? Well, all organizations, whether they're for-profit, commercial, nonprofit, are about forwarding some sort of an action, whether it is taking care of people, whether it is producing widgets, whether it is cleaning up a city, whatever it might be, there's some goal, there's some forward action. So first, and this is where this one comes in, is we identify what that style is. And then we figure out, okay, what do I do about it? You have several choices. You can do nothing. You can do the direct approach. Hey, I see that such and such is happening. You can create those buffers, boundaries, workarounds, and defenses. You can leave the interaction, and in extreme cases, you may need to end the relationship or the situation. All right, so here is a brief snapshot of the 15, and now I'm just going to briefly touch upon all 15. All right, so psychological cycle of violence. And if you're familiar with the physical cycle of violence, it's very similar. There is the situation that occurs, there is the apology, the honeymoon, and then it's going to at some point come back to yet another blow up. And this happens in the workplace. And where people, that's where you might hear toxic managers or toxic employees or the office bully or whatever it might be, is because they might be exhibiting this particular pattern where there's the blow up, apology, honeymoon, and then the cycle starts again. Attack, parry, riposte. This comes from Mark's days as a stage combat choreographer and a fencer. So this is a fencing move. And so what happens is the person says whatever they say, they attack. And then you, on the other end of that, have to say, no, I didn't, the parry. And then the riposte, which is the, and here's why. So it's the only one of these that requires both people to be part of this pattern. Because if the person just attacks and you do nothing, you're not really parrying or riposting. When we do these in longer workshops, we actually role play some of these, not all of them. We would never role play the psychological cycle of violence because that would probably be triggering for many people. So we're not going to do that. Debate club. And this is when somebody wants to argue a point that is no longer relevant. Maybe the decision's already been made. Maybe the committee or the board or the department or the team has already made the decision, and somebody just wants to keep arguing like in debate club. Talk about no forward action. This is a perfect example of that. Unauthorized declarations. And this is when, so it's funny, is Mark and I have probably been working on this program for over 10 years and we're always adding to it. And this one, we just keep refining over and over. What makes this a particular pattern and stands out from the others is that it's somebody usually in some position of authority and who then says something that isn't true. So, for example, Mark took something to the post office, and he used to collect and sell comic books when he was younger. And so, if somebody bought a big package, he would take a whole box into the post office. And since it was a big package, he had stamps on all the sides. Did this for years. Anyway, he walked into the post office one day, and this postal worker says, "You can't put stamps on the sides, only on the top." Now, Mark's been doing this for years. He knows that's not true, but because this guy is in some sort of authority, completely shuts it down. He had to go to another post office. So that's a little bit of a definition of this one. Monologue. I'm kind of monologuing now, but it's because I'm in this content giving role. But if you've been in a conversation with someone where they seem to be clueless and they just keep going on and they don't seem to be getting any of the clues, like you looking at your watch or eye rolling or eyes glazing or whatever, they just keep going on and on. And then conversation domination can look a little bit like monologue, but the difference is that the person will actually interject themselves and maybe raise their voice because they have to have that stage. They what they have to say is so important that they are going to interject what they have to say and make sure you don't have a chance for whatever reason. Again, in our deeper trainings, we actually talk about what some of the motivations are behind each of these to give us that better understanding. Injecting process comments. And here's one thing I forgot to mention. When I'm giving these examples, I'm talking about them. They did that. The postal worker did this, etc. What I haven't said yet is that we all exhibit one or two or so of these styles ourselves. This one, injecting process comments, is mine. This is the one that if I am going to exhibit a dysfunctional communication style, this is the one that I exhibit. So this is where in the middle of the conversation, whatever it is you're talking about, I would kind of interrupt and halt that flow and say, "Are you sure everything's all right? You seem a little stressed." And I am deviating the conversation from whatever it was we were talking about to to talk about something completely different because either I'm uncomfortable or for whatever reason I can't move forward in that conversation. Making stuff up. Um, it's really interesting because and you can see in the description, it's like, well, isn't that a lie? Well, not necessarily, because sometimes people really believe it, or they just can't be bothered to figure it out. So, for example, we were in a grocery store and was looking for a turkey breast and a boneless turkey breast. And it's for a recipe. We've made the recipe before. I know it exists. And we asked somebody in the meat department, and he says, "Oh, it doesn't exist. That just doesn't exist. You basically just get lunch meat." And okay, well, we go into the refrigerated section, and guess what? We found boneless turkey breast. And I think it's just because he didn't, it was toward the end of his shift. He didn't want to be bothered helping us. So he just said, doesn't exist. You don't want to use that anyway. Okay. Non-acknowledgement of communications. This usually happens in email, and I'm sure we've all seen it. And of course, now we have a term for it called ghosting. Um, and sometimes it's not quite ghosting, it can be, let's call it partial ghosting, where you send someone an email, you have 3 bulleted items, and they respond to you and they've only addressed one of them. So you have to go back and ask again about the other two that they didn't address. And maybe now they address one more of them, but they still haven't addressed the third one. So this is definitely a time waster because you have to keep following up because for whatever reason, they are not responding to your request and your communication. Shutting down of possibilities. This is, kind of all those negative Nellies that'll never work. We tried it before, we can't do it. We delivered this training a month or so ago, and somebody asked, well, what if it's because you know it won't work? That it's not, because we've tried it before. Then is it really dysfunctional? And again, there are two things that make it a dysfunctional communication style. If one of the people in that interaction leaves with some negative effect and it shuts down any kind of forward motion. So in the case, so the example we gave her, the possible response is if you're in a meeting and one of your teammates, says, "Oh, let's do this," and you know it's not going to work, there's a way to respond to that because she said, "I'll just shut down and I won't say anything." Well, that's not really helpful, is it? It's better to have that direct response of, "Hey, Sally, that sounds like a great idea. We tried this before, and in that environment, it didn't work. If you're seeing something different now, maybe we can consider it." So see how that actually still continues to move the thing forward, doesn't shut the possibilities down as much. Unsolicited advice. And this is where somebody, without being asked, tells you you should do that. Um, this was actually a former best friend of mine. She would constantly tell me what to do and not, if you want my opinion, or here's what I think you should do. It was, you should do this. You need to do this. You can't do that. And I finally asked her if she treated, like, she was a coach. I said, do you treat your clients that way? And she said, no. I asked them for permission. And I said, so you need to ask me for permission. Hence why I said former best friends, because we're no longer friends. Um, Invalidating statements. There's a whole list. This is, you don't know what you're talking about. You're the only one who's upset by this. Uh, there must be something wrong with you, right? So these are statements that are made to demean you and really kind of pull the rug out of you. It's a power struggle, basically. Stuck on a problem. And this is when the problem has already been resolved or just no longer exists, but they cannot get over it. They just can't move forward. So the example that we use in this is when we were part of a group of other consultants and trainers, and we were putting on an event, and we had a suggestion for each of the four partners to give a presentation. And the one was not comfortable, and she said, I don't want to do that. I don't like that format. So we quickly agreed upon a format that worked for all of us. Every week when we would have our weekly planning meeting, she'd say, I'm still upset that you all thought we should do it with each of us speaking. Yeah, we know. That's why we're not doing it every week. Every week it was brought up. Um, Talk about not being able to move things forward. Class clown. This one is, I'll tell on Mark. This is definitely a Mark one. And I'm sure we've all experienced it growing up and being in a classroom with people. I mean, family members, you might have family members that still do this, where it's because they're uncomfortable, they have to do something funny or make a comment or interrupt in some way that, whether they're conscious or unconscious of it, is relieving their tension. And again, sometimes these styles can be appropriate, but if people in the interaction leave with a negative feeling and it halts, pauses, prevents forward motion, that's what makes it dysfunctional. Oh, that was a movie clip. Oh, let's see. Do we have to? No, we don't have time for it. Sorry. You can do a movie clip, but we don't have time. Contrary is someone that says that no matter what the thing that is said, that person will say the opposite, whether they believe it or not. Um, I and it doesn't matter what it is. It's that if you state something, they will contradict it no matter what, even if you're like, nobody would ever contradict that. I posted on Facebook one time while we were in the process of moving, and I said, moving is a pain in the rear. I said it a little differently, and this person was like, I love moving. And I'm like, nobody loves moving. Like, nobody, nobody loves moving. And it wasn't just that one time because, okay, maybe she is the one person in the world who loves moving, but there were other things I'd post on Facebook and she would immediately contradict. Um, and it was that same kind of thing. Like, no, nobody would say that. So you're just being contrary. All right. So here are the 15, and you can see that we have graphics that hopefully help illustrate what these are. Um, Again, if we could go deep, if we had a lot more time, we could talk about, what this looks like, how it manifests, that motivation behind it, how it really does disrupt things in an organization, and then how you can defend against it. There is a self-assessment, and it's basically just taking those 15 and saying, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 is never and 5 is always, and then in between, where are you on these? Because again, none of us are immune. We're all human, and we all have our ways of avoiding things or stopping the action or dealing with our own discomfort. So I am going to stop there and see if there are any questions. I see there are a few things in the chat. There we go. All right. Any questions?
Don, there was a question. Will this presentation be forwarded to us? I missed some information.
I can certainly, we can put this in a PDF and forward this to you all.
She said, great information. Thank you.
You are so welcome, Lisa.
So, Don, in your experience, and thank you so much for sharing with us your expertise. We can really see that, you have really worked on this content and kept on revising it because it's very current. Your examples are so current. Um, what would be, in your experience, what would be the best way for us to handle when confronted by any of this in your experience?
So again, it's going to depend. It's going to depend on the relationship. So, for example, if you have a pretty decent relationship with a colleague, like say maybe you've been working together for years and they're doing class clown all the time or monologue, and you say, Bill, I appreciate that you like being funny and clever, but sometimes when you do that, it knocks me off center, and I feel like it's pausing the forward action we could be doing. So, but if it's in a case where you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel like they're going to be receptive, then there are other ways to deal with it. So, for example, with the attack, parry, riposte, um, when there were people, and so you have to understand that the reason that these exist are because these are real situations that happen throughout, our lives and lives of clients and whatever. So we have stories and examples for all of these, and we have what we call the poster child. So the poster child for parry, attack, parry, riposte. So since Mark knew this was a pattern, this person would do that, he would come prepared all the time. Like, hey, Mark, you didn't do this. Already prepared? Yes, I did, and here's the proof. Because he knew that's what he was going to expect. Psychological cycle of violence. He actually had a boss in a workplace who would berate him, tell him how worthless he was, one time, and then there would be the apology, the honeymoon. Mark, you're so wonderful, you do such a good job. And then one time this boss made the mistake of writing him a letter telling him how awful he was, and so Mark put in his 2-week notice, kept the letter in his wallet in case, because then it was the honeymoon period. Mark, you're so wonderful. And he'd pull out the letter and go, yeah, no, I'm still quitting. And that's when he was much younger. And before he went and got his master's in clinical psychology and became a psychotherapist. So it really does depend on the relationship, the hierarchy, right? If it's the vice president, you might not want to call him out on some of his dysfunctional communication styles. Maybe that's something you take to HR. So it just depends. Yeah. So Maria asked, I see, how would you start resolving a communication issue if the other party is not open-minded and gets defensive? On that, it would depend on the dysfunctional communication style itself, because remember when I talked about boundaries, buffers, defenses, neutralizers, what you use depends on that style. So for example, if it's a monologue, I would I would do something like I'd tell somebody to call me, or I set an alarm. And if I had to talk to him for 10 minutes in the office, but I knew that because they monologue and it would go on forever and ever and ever, I'd be like, the alarm would go, oh, I'm so sorry. I have this meeting I have to get to. Can I get that answer to that question real quick before I go? Um, let's see, the contrary person. Boy, see, that one's hard because the only contraries I've ever known, it was like there was no talking to them. Like there was just no talking to them. Um, if it's a professional relationship, and again, depending on the hierarchy, if if they're like maybe at a lateral level with you or below you, I'd say one could just be ignore it. If they're, you know, part of a tight knit or a team, like a small team, so you really can't avoid them, or they're higher up than you, Yeah, that's a larger conversation to really say how does that manifest and here's what we would recommend. Sorry that I don't have more time to answer way more questions. I I think this stuff is fascinating and it is just interesting how it just, shows up. And I see some other questions, information on the other types of trainings you offer. When I send to Arlene the presentation, I'll also send something on some of the courses that we offer. And you can always check us out at the schulergroupllc.com.
Okay, so thank you so much for your time today, Dawn. This has been very helpful and insightful for us, and we are looking forward to another session of Mark towards the end of the month. Energy conservation. It is not just about global warming. And I don't know if it's going to be you or Mark by the
It'll
time.
It will be Mark because it's another one of his signature programs, but it's not one that we have co-trained on for 10 years like this one. And so since there was the communication error, he was not prepared. And I've been training since 5 when I'd come home from kindergarten and teach my stuffed animals and dolls, all about colors. So I had no problem just jumping in and delivering this day, but it will be Mark at the end of the month.
So the email address people are still asking is the Schuler Group LLC.com.
I just put it in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And if you have any questions, I'll put in my email. Like if you want some deeper, something comes up, a question that didn't come up here, feel free to answer, send me an email. If I can't answer it, I'm sure Mark will be able to, and we will, do whatever we can to get you where you need to go.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, Dawn. And
You are
we'll see you again, hopefully in the near future.
Sounds good.
Oh,
All
by
right.
the way, do you have any books? Did you guys create any books or articles?
We have lots of articles on our website, the Schuler Group LLC. You can't see the email or the site address. How can I do this and make it easy? Let's see.
Oh, because